The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Council gleamed like captured starlight as Ambassador Minji Park stepped through the dimensional gateway. She had made this journey dozens of times over the past 5 years, but today felt different. The usual courteous greetings from junior diplomats were absent. Instead, stern-faced security personnel from a dozen different species lined the corridors, their various forms of military dress unmistakable. Minji's aide, Jackson Torres, walked beside her with a data tablet clutched tightly in his hands. Behind them, the rest of humanity's diplomatic corps moved in silence. They had received the emergency summons only 3 days ago, transmitted across faster-than-light channels with a priority code Minji had never seen used before. The council chambers orbited twin stars in the Exelon system, positioned at a gravitational balance point that kept the massive structure stable. Through the transparent walls, Minji could see hundreds of ships from various species, far more than usually gathered for standard sessions. Whatever was happening, the entire galaxy seemed to be watching. A tall figure approached them, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. Council Speaker Thralvan of the Kashari people stood nearly 3 meters tall, his ancient species having guided the council for over 2,000 years. His usual warm demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Ambassador Park, Thralvan said, his voice resonating through a translation device. The council awaits. Please, follow me directly to the main chamber. No offer of refreshment, no small talk about their journey. Minji exchanged a quick glance with Jackson but said nothing. They followed the speaker through corridors that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic diplomacy. The main chamber was enormous, shaped like an amphitheater, with seating for representatives from over 300 species. At the center sat the 12 seats of the elder species, the civilizations that had formed the council millennia ago and had guided galactic affairs ever since. Today, all 12 seats were filled. Minji's stomach tightened. The full council only convened for matters of extreme importance. As the human delegation took their designated positions, Minji noticed the seating arrangement had changed. Usually, humanity sat among the newer species in the outer rings. Today, their seats had been moved to a raised platform in the center of the chamber. Like defendants in a trial, Thralvan raised one crystalline appendage, and the chamber fell silent. Holographic displays activated throughout the room, and Minji realized this session was being broadcast across the galaxy. Millions, perhaps billions, of beings were watching. This emergency session of the Galactic Council is now convened, Thralvan announced. We address a matter of great concern to the stability and peace of our galactic community. A holographic display appeared above the chamber, showing a map of known space. Human colonies, stations, and territorial claims were highlighted in blue. Minji felt her chest tighten as she watched the display zoom and rotate, showing the extent of human expansion over the past 3 centuries. Humanity emerged into galactic space 300 years ago, Thralvan continued. By the standards of the Council, they are infants in cosmic terms. The Kashari had already built a stellar civilization before humanity had discovered fire. The Dravik Concordat had mastered faster-than-light travel, while humans still fought with bronze weapons. Minji kept her expression neutral, though she could sense where this was going. Yet in just 3 centuries, humanity has established colonies on 74 worlds. They have built military installations in unclaimed space. Their fleet strength has grown exponentially. Their resource extraction operations span 40 systems. Thralvan's voice grew harder. This rate of expansion is unprecedented. It is destabilizing. It is dangerous. Another holographic display appeared, this time showing human military vessels. Carriers, destroyers, and defense platforms rotated slowly in the projection. Minji recognized several classified designs that humanity had tried to keep secret. Our intelligence services have monitored humanity's military buildup with growing alarm, said a new voice. Commander Zekthal of the Dravik Concordat stood, his reptilian features twisted in what Minji had learned was their expression of concern. Your species claims to seek peace. Yet you build weapons at a rate that suggests preparation for war. The Fonter, Was Wan 7. Quote, a representative from the Pelion Consortium spoke next, her multiple limbs gesturing at the displays. Your resource extraction violates the spirit of sustainable development that this council has promoted for millennia. You consume, expand, and build with no apparent limits. One by one, representatives from the elder species voiced their concerns. The pattern became clear. Humanity was being accused of reckless expansion, militarization, and resource exploitation. The younger species in the outer rings remained silent. But Minji could sense their attention. Some looked sympathetic. Others worried. Finally, Thrallvan stood again. The Council has deliberated on this matter for many cycles. We have concluded that humanity's current trajectory poses a risk to galactic stability. Therefore, we present the following requirements. A document appeared in the holographic displays, its terms scrolling slowly enough for all to read. First, humanity must agree to limit further colonial expansion to no more than 5 new worlds per century. Second, humanity must reduce its military fleet strength by 40% and submit all military installations to Council inspection. Third, humanity must agree to resource extraction quotas, as determined by the Pelion Consortium's sustainability standards. Fourth, humanity must accept a Council oversight committee with authority to enforce these limitations. The chamber remained silent. Minji felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. These weren't suggestions or recommendations. They were demands that would effectively place humanity under the permanent supervision and control of the elder species. Failure to accept these terms will result in immediate economic sanctions, Thrallvan said. All trade agreements with Council species will be suspended. Furthermore, the Council will authorize military containment operations to prevent further human expansion into unclaimed space. Jackson leaned close to Minji and whispered, they're boxing us in. If we accept, we give up our sovereignty. If we refuse, they'll strangle our economy and blockade our space. Minji stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned toward her. She could feel the weight of their expectations, their assumptions that humanity would either capitulate or protest futilely. Council Speaker, Minji said, her voice steady. I request a formal hearing before the full Council and all member species. Humanity deserves the opportunity to present its position and respond to these accusations before any decision is finalized. Thrallvan regarded her for a long moment. She thought she saw something in his crystalline features. Was it respect or pity? Very well, he said finally. The Council grants humanity 1 solar cycle to prepare its response. This session is adjourned. As the delegates began to disperse, Minji remained standing on the platform, staring at the holographic displays still showing human colonies and fleets. 1 solar cycle. 10 standard days to prepare a case that could determine the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. She had no idea how they would do it, but she knew one thing with certainty. Humanity would not go quietly into subjugation. The human diplomatic quarters on the Council station felt cramped despite their generous size. Minji had converted the main receiving room into an operations center, with holographic displays covering every wall. Her team worked around the clock, analyzing data, preparing arguments, and coordinating with Earth. Jackson stood at the central display, manipulating intelligence reports with quick gestures. It's worse than we thought. The Dravik Concordat has already drafted military deployment plans in case we refuse. The Silari Collective has committed to supporting economic sanctions. Even some of the younger species are staying quiet. They're afraid to oppose the elder species. Minji rubbed her temples. She had slept perhaps 6 hours in the last 3 days. What about potential allies? The Torvani might be sympathetic, but they won't risk their trade agreements. The Velkir privately expressed support, but they're too weak to matter politically. Jackson shook his head. We're isolated, Minji. The door chimed, and Dr. Sarah Chen, humanity's chief xenohistorian, entered carrying a stack of data crystals. Despite the crisis, She looked energized. I found something. Actually, I found a lot of somethings. Minji waved her to the central display. Show me. Sarah loaded the first crystal, and a historical timeline appeared. The Council loves to present itself as the guardians of galactic peace. Right? The wise elders who learned from ancient conflicts and now guide younger species toward enlightenment. That's their narrative, Minji agreed. It's incomplete at best, deliberately misleading at worst. Sarah pulled up a series of documents. 4,000 years ago, the Kashari and Dravik fought a war that devastated 17 systems. They've buried it in their historical records, but the evidence is there in astronomical data, radiation signatures, debris fields, dead worlds. Jackson leaned forward. The Kashari and Dravik? They act like they've been allies forever. Now they are. But they got there by nearly destroying each other first. Sarah brought up another file. The Pelion Consortium, who are now lecturing us about sustainable resource use. 3,000 years ago, they strip-mined 42 systems in the outer arm, leaving nothing but dead rocks. It triggered an ecological collapse that killed trillions. Minji felt a spark of hope. What else? The Silari Collective encountered 17 primitive species during their expansion phase. Guess how many of those species exist today as independent civilizations? Sarah paused. 0. Some were uplifted and absorbed into Silari culture. Others simply vanished from records. The Silari claim they all voluntarily integrated, but the pattern looks a lot like forced assimilation. Or worse. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The elder species weren't moral authorities who had always walked the path of wisdom. They were survivors of their own aggressive, expansionist phases who now wanted to prevent younger species from following the same path. Can we prove this? Minji asked. Most of it. Some requires reading between the lines. But the core facts are documented in their own historical databases. They just don't talk about it, and nobody has bothered to look because the elder species control the narrative. Minji's communication console chimed with an encrypted priority signal from Earth. She activated it, and the image of Admiral Hyunwoo Kang appeared. The Admiral's weathered face was lined with concern, but his eyes were sharp. Ambassador Park, I'm transmitting updated intelligence on our strategic position. Your eyes only for now. Minji activated the security protocols, and a flood of classified data began downloading. Her eyes widened as she scanned the files. Admiral, this is the complete picture, Kang finished. Something we've kept quiet even from most of our own people. The Council thinks they know our fleet strength and defensive capabilities. They're wrong. The data painted a very different picture of humanity's military position than what the Council had presented. Yes, humanity had built 74 colonies, but around and between those colonies existed a network of hidden installations, supply caches, and defensive platforms far beyond what any intelligence service had detected. We've spent 3 centuries preparing for the worst, Kang explained. Not because we wanted war, but because we've seen what happens when you're not prepared. Earth's history taught us that lesson in blood. Minji thought of the 20th and 21st centuries on Earth. World wars that killed hundreds of millions. Nuclear weapons that brought humanity to the brink of extinction. Climate collapse that forced the greatest migration in human history. The brutal century of unification that followed, when surviving nations finally realized they had to work together or die separately. Humanity came into space already scarred, Kang continued. We didn't have the luxury of learning these lessons gradually over millennia, like the elder species. We learned them all at once, in the space of a few centuries, and we nearly didn't survive. That's why we build redundancy into everything. That's why every colony has defensive capabilities. That's why we spread ourselves across multiple systems, instead of concentrating on a few worlds. They see it as aggressive expansion, Minji said, and we see it as survival strategy. A species concentrated on a handful of worlds can be destroyed by a single catastrophic event. Ask the Velkir, their homeworld was hit by a gamma-ray burst 60 years ago. They survived only because they had colonies. But barely. Gamma-ray. 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 Jackson had been listening intently. So what are you suggesting, Admiral? That we threaten them with our hidden capabilities? No, Kang's voice was firm. Threats are what weak nations make. We're not weak, and we're not threatening anyone. But we need to make the Council understand reality. They think they can contain us, control us, limit us for our own good. They need to understand that humanity cannot and will not accept subjugation, and that any attempt to force the issue will fail. Not because we want conflict, but because we're too well prepared and too dispersed to be easily contained. Minji understood. This wasn't about starting a fight. It was about making the cost of forcing a fight so obviously high that nobody would try. Deterrence through strength and demonstrated capability. There's more, Kang said. We've been monitoring communications from some of the younger Council species. Many of them are unhappy with the elder species' dominance. They're tired of being told what they can and cannot do, of having their development limited by rules that the elders themselves didn't follow during their own expansion. If you play this right, Minji, you might find unexpected allies. After the Admiral signed off, Minji sat in silence for a long moment. Sarah and Jackson waited, understanding that their ambassador was processing everything. Finally, Minji spoke. We're not going to beg for understanding. We're not going to apologize for being prudent. We're going to tell them the truth about humanity, about our history, and about why we do what we do. And then we're going to tell them some truths about themselves that they've been hiding. That's going to make them angry, Jackson observed. Good, Minji replied. Because right now, they think we're children who need to be controlled. It's time they remembered that children grow up, and sometimes the children see things the parents have forgotten. She stood and looked at her team. We have 7 days left. Sarah, compile everything we have on the elder species' hidden history. Jackson, work with fleet intelligence to prepare a complete but carefully controlled reveal of our actual strategic position. I want them to see enough to understand they can't contain us without massive cost. But not so much that they feel threatened. And you? Sarah asked. I'm going to write a declaration, Minji said. One that humanity can be proud of, whether the Council accepts it or not. As her team dispersed to their tasks, Minji pulled up a blank document and began to write. She thought of Earth's history, of all the times humanity had faced extinction and somehow survived, of the painful lessons learned in fire and blood, of the determination that had carried humanity to the stars. The Council was about to discover that humanity hadn't come to space seeking permission. They had come seeking partnership between equals, and if the elder species couldn't accept that, then the foundations of the galactic order would have to change. The Council chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from over 300 species filled every available seat, and holographic projections showed millions more watching from their homeworlds. Minji stood at the central podium, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her. Behind her, the human delegation sat in disciplined silence. Above, the 12 elder species looked down from their elevated seats like ancient judges. Council Speaker Thrall Van raised an appendage. The Council recognizes Ambassador Minji Park of humanity. You have requested this hearing to respond to the limitations placed upon your species. You may speak. Minji took a breath and began. Thank you, Council Speaker. I stand before you today not to plead for mercy or understanding, but to speak truth. First, truth about humanity. Then, truth about this Council. And finally, truth about the choice we all face. A murmur rippled through the chamber. This was not the humble beginning they had expected. You call humanity young, and you are correct. 3 centuries in space is nothing compared to your millennia. But you mistake youth for ignorance, and that is a dangerous error. Minji activated her own holographic display, showing Earth from space. The blue and green world rotated slowly, looking peaceful and beautiful. This is Earth, our homeworld. It looks serene from orbit, doesn't it? But zoom in closer, and you would see the scars. Radioactive craters from nuclear weapons, flooded coastlines from climate collapse, memorials to wars that killed hundreds of millions. Humanity nearly destroyed itself. Not once, but multiple times. The display shifted, showing historical footage from Earth's darkest periods. Cities burning, refugee camps stretching to the horizon, nuclear mushroom clouds rising into the sky. We learned what war means the hard way. We learned what happens when nations compete for limited resources. We learned the cost of hatred, nationalism, and the belief that might makes right. These weren't abstract lessons from ancient history. These were lessons paid for in blood by our grandparents and great-grandparents. Minji saw some of the younger species representatives leaning forward, listening intently. The elder species remained impassive. When humanity finally united and reached the stars, we carried those lessons with us. We expanded not out of greed, but out of survival instinct. We learned that a species confined to one world can be extinguished by a single catastrophe. Asteroid impact, gamma-ray burst, solar flare, pandemic. Any of these could end us. So, we spread ourselves across multiple systems, ensuring that no single disaster could destroy humanity. You call this aggressive expansion. Commander Zekthal of the Dravik interrupted. You colonize at a rate that destabilizes the galactic order. And what rate would you consider acceptable? Minji shot back. 5 worlds per century, as you proposed? That would take us 15,000 years to reach the same level of distribution that the Dravik achieved in their first 2,000 years of space travel. The Dravik commander's expression shifted. Minji had done her homework. You accuse us of military buildup. Minji continued. Yes, we build defenses. We build them around every colony, every station, every outpost, because we know what happens to the unprepared. You want to know why humanity builds so many ships? Let me show you. The holographic display changed, showing a timeline of Earth's history. Humanity has existed as a technologically advanced species for less than 500 years. In that time, we nearly went extinct 3 separate times. The nuclear age, the climate wars, the plague years. Each time, we survived by the smallest margins. We learned that hoping for peace is not the same as ensuring peace. We learned that the universe is dangerous, and that survival requires preparation. Minji paused, letting her words sink in. Then she played her first major card. You, the elder species, sit in judgment of our expansion and military preparations. But let us examine your own histories. Histories you have conveniently forgotten or hidden. Sarah's research appeared on the displays. Archaeological evidence, astronomical data, recovered records. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as images of devastated worlds appeared. 4,000 years ago, the Kashari and Dravik fought a war that destroyed 17 inhabited systems. Radiation signatures are still detectable. We found the records you buried in secondary archives. Billions died. Thralvan's crystalline body seemed to darken. That conflict was a tragedy that you learned from. Yes, I know. But you learned it through experience, through making mistakes, through fighting and nearly destroying each other. Now you want to prevent humanity from even having the capability to make similar mistakes. You want to lock us into permanent weakness, justified by sins we haven't committed. The Pelion Consortium representative stood, her multiple limbs trembling. You overstep, human. Our history includes the strip mining of 42 systems 3,000 years ago, Minji said calmly. The Pelion expansion era. You extracted resources so aggressively that you collapsed the ecologies of those systems. Some are still recovering. Yet now you lecture us about sustainable development. 1. Armor. Armor. Minji turned to face the Solari Collective's delegation, and the Solari encountered 17 primitive species during their expansion. How many of those species still exist as independent civilizations? None. Some were absorbed into Solari culture. Others simply vanished. You call it uplift and integration. The pattern looks remarkably like conquest and forced assimilation. The chamber descended into chaos, representatives shouting at each other in a dozen languages, the elder species demanding order, younger species calling for answers. Minji stood calmly at the podium, waiting. Thrall Van finally restored order. His voice was cold. You seek to deflect judgment by raising ancient history. Whatever mistakes our peoples made, we learned from them. We built this council to prevent such tragedies from recurring. That is why we must guide younger species away from the same paths. Guide or control? Minji asked. There is a difference. Guidance respects autonomy. Control denies it. You don't want to guide us, Council Speaker. You want to limit us, restrict us, ensure that we never become powerful enough to challenge the established order. The established order has maintained galactic peace for over 1,000 years, Thrallvan said. Has it? Or has it simply frozen the balance of power in favor of those who were already strong? Minji gestured to the outer rings, where the younger species sat. How many of them live under limitations you don't impose on yourselves? How many are told they can't expand too quickly, can't build too many ships, can't extract too many resources while you, the elder species, face no such restrictions? Several younger species representatives began speaking among themselves. Minji could see the recognition in their faces. She was voicing frustrations they had felt, but never dared express. Humanity rejects your ultimatum, Minji declared. Not out of arrogance or aggression, but because we refuse to accept a second-class position in galactic civilization. We seek partnership, not dominance. We want cooperation, not conflict. But we will not surrender our autonomy, and we will not accept artificial limitations that you do not impose upon yourselves. Then you choose sanctions and containment, Commander Zekthal said. We choose dignity, Minji replied. We choose equality, and we invite every species in this chamber to consider whether the current system truly serves justice, or merely serves those who were fortunate enough to reach the stars first. The chamber erupted again, but this time the character of the chaos was different. Younger species were standing, some addressing the elder species directly, others talking among themselves. The careful order of the council was beginning to fracture. Thrallvan raised his appendages, calling for silence. This hearing is recessed. The council will deliberate on humanity's response and announce its decision. As the chamber emptied, Minji saw several younger species representatives approaching the human delegation, the Torvani ambassador, the Velkir delegation, even a few species she had never spoken with before. They didn't say much, but their presence was clear. Humanity's declaration had resonated with more than just humans. Jackson leaned close. You just challenged the entire power structure of the galaxy. Yes, Minji said quietly. Now we see if anyone stands with us, or if we stand alone. The council remained in closed session for 18 hours. Minji and her team waited in their quarters, monitoring communications and preparing for multiple scenarios. The galaxy watched and debated. Humanity's declaration had sparked discussions across thousands of worlds. Then Admiral Kang's face appeared on Minji's private communication channel. His expression was serious but determined. Minji, it's time for the next phase. The Council is preparing to call for a vote on sanctions. We need to change the calculation before that happens. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that the Council is operating on incomplete information. They think they know our capabilities. They think containment is a viable option. We need to show them the truth, but carefully, not as a threat, but as a reality check. Minji understood. Do it. But Admiral, make sure everyone understands this isn't a threat. We're not looking for a fight. Agreed. Stand by. An hour later, Every communication channel in the Council station lit up simultaneously. Admiral Kang's transmission was being broadcast on open frequencies, ensuring that every species could see and hear what humanity was about to reveal. Kang appeared in holographic form throughout the station, speaking from humanity's primary deep space installation. Behind him, through transparent walls, massive military vessels moved in perfect formation. I am Admiral Hyunwoo Kang, commander of humanity's deep space fleet. I address the Galactic Council and all member species openly, because what I have to say deserves to be heard by everyone, not decided behind closed doors. In the council chambers, which had hastily reconvened, representatives watched in shock as Kang brought up tactical displays. The council has based its containment plans on intelligence estimates of human military capabilities. Those estimates are wrong, not because of any deception on our part, but because you were looking at what we built in plain sight and assumed that was everything. The display showed a map of human space, but now additional markers appeared. Dozens of them. Hidden installations, supply depots, defensive platforms positioned throughout unclaimed space between human colonies. Humanity has spent 3 centuries building redundancy into every aspect of our civilization. We don't just colonize worlds, we establish supply networks that can operate independently. We don't just build defensive stations, we position them to create overlapping fields of coverage. Every colony can be reinforced within days. Every fleet has fallback positions and supply caches. Commander Zekthal stood abruptly. This is a threat. You hide military installations throughout the galaxy. In unclaimed space, Kang interrupted calmly. We have violated no treaties and encroached on no territory. These installations exist in the gaps between claimed systems, in regions that no species has colonized or shown interest in. They are defensive in nature, designed to ensure that humanity's colonies cannot be isolated and besieged. The display zoomed in on several installations. Kang walked through their capabilities methodically, showing enough to make his point, but not enough to compromise security. I'm not telling you this to threaten anyone. I'm telling you this because the Council needs to understand reality. You cannot contain humanity without a major military operation that would span dozens of systems. Such an operation would require commitment from multiple fleet groups, would take years to execute, and would result in massive casualties on all sides. It would destabilize entire regions of space. Kang paused, letting that sink in. But here's the most important thing you need to understand. We don't want that fight. We never wanted it. Everything we built was designed to make sure nobody would ever try to force us into submission, because we learned from Earth's history that the best way to prevent war is to make the cost of war obviously not worth it. In the council chamber, several elder species representatives were conferring urgently among themselves. The Pelion Consortium's ambassador looked particularly shaken. You accuse us of aggressive expansion, Kang continued. But look at what we haven't done. We haven't claimed territory beyond what we actively use. We haven't demanded tribute from weaker species. We haven't formed military alliances aimed at any particular civilization. We've been peaceful neighbors for 300 years. The only aggression has been in your ultimatum. Minji watched from her seat as Kang brought up another display, this one showing communications intercepts and diplomatic cables. We've also been paying attention to galactic politics. We know that many younger species feel stifled by the elder species' dominance. We know the Council operates on a de facto 2-tier system, where elder species set rules that they themselves don't follow. We know that several species have privately expressed frustration with this arrangement, but feared speaking up. Now Kang played his final card. Humanity proposes an alternative to the Council's ultimatum. We will agree to mutual transparency and proportional limitation treaties, but only if they apply equally to all species. The Keshari want humanity to limit fleet strength? Fine, but the Keshari limit theirs proportionally too. The Pelion want resource extraction quotas? We'll accept them if the Pelion accept the same per capita limits. The Dravik want military installation inspections? Humanity agrees. If the Dravik open their facilities to the same scrutiny, The chamber fell absolutely silent. Kang had just proposed something revolutionary. A system where the elder species would face the same rules they imposed on everyone else. This isn't about humanity refusing all limitations, Kang said. It's about insisting on fairness. If rules are necessary for galactic stability, then they should apply to everyone. There should be no privileged class that operates above the law. Before the elder species could respond, something unexpected happened. The Torvani ambassador stood. The Torvani delegation supports humanity's alternative proposal. We have long felt that the Council's rules should apply equally to all members. Then, the Velkir stood. The Velkir agree. Equal rules for all species, or the current system lacks moral authority. One by one, representatives from younger species began standing. Some spoke, others simply stood in silent support. Within minutes, over 50 species had indicated their backing for humanity's proposal. Thralvan looked around the chamber, his crystalline features reflecting the changing political landscape. The elder species had always controlled the council through a combination of respect, fear, and the younger species' reluctance to challenge the established order. Now, that order was fracturing before his eyes. The Silari Collective's chief diplomat, an ancient being who rarely spoke, finally rose. This is unprecedented. The Council has operated successfully for millennia under the current system. The Council has operated successfully for elder species, the Torvani ambassador countered. For many of us, it has been a system that limits our potential, while protecting yours. The Pelion Consortium's representative tried a different approach. Equal limitations may sound fair, but they ignore the reality that elder species have greater responsibilities. We maintain the infrastructure of galactic civilization, provide humanitarian aid, protect trade routes, then write those responsibilities into the treaties, Minji interjected. If elder species take on greater responsibilities, let that be formally recognized and compensated. But don't use it as justification for unlimited military power while restricting ours. The debate raged for hours. The elder species tried multiple approaches, appealing to tradition, warning of chaos, suggesting that younger species didn't understand the complexities of galactic governance. But each time, they faced a newly emboldened coalition of younger species who had found their voice through humanity's example. Finally, as the local sun began to set beyond the transparent walls, Thralvan called for a recess. The Council will deliberate on these new developments. This session is suspended for 2 standard days. As representatives filed out, Minji saw the elder species delegations gathering in tight groups, their body language suggesting intense disagreement among themselves. Some seemed angry, others contemplative. The younger species, meanwhile, were energized, talking excitedly among themselves. Jackson approached Minji with a data pad. We're getting messages from dozens of delegations. Some want to coordinate positions. Others are asking if humanity would consider forming a formal coalition of younger species. Tell them we're interested in partnerships, not factions, Minji said. This isn't about young versus old. It's about fair versus unfair. But she knew the reality was more complex. For the first time in 1,000 years, the elder species' control over the Council was genuinely threatened. The question now was whether they would accept change gracefully or fight to maintain their dominance. The next 2 days would determine the future of galactic civilization. The Council chamber remained sealed for 2 full days. Outside, the galaxy debated humanity's declaration and Admiral Kang's revelations with an intensity not seen in centuries. Political analysts across hundreds of worlds examined the implications. Trade markets fluctuated wildly as investors tried to predict whether the galaxy was heading toward reform or conflict. Inside humanity's diplomatic quarters, Minji and her team monitored thousands of communication channels simultaneously. The younger species were organizing, comparing notes, drafting joint positions. Several elder species junior diplomats had reached out through back channels, speaking off the record about internal debates within their own delegations. The Kashari are split. Sarah reported, reviewing the latest intelligence. Their senior diplomats want to maintain the current system, but their younger generation sees this as an opportunity for reform. Apparently, there's been growing frustration even within the elder species about how rigid the system has become. Jackson pulled up another analysis. The Dravik are the wild cards. Military honor is central to their culture. Part of them respects humanity's strategic preparation. Another part sees it as a challenge to their dominance. If they swing toward confrontation, this could still go badly. Minji stared at the holographic displays showing troop movements, fleet positions, and diplomatic cables. Humanity's forces remained at high alert throughout the galaxy. Back on Earth and the colonies, billions of people waited to see if their species would win equality or face sanctions and possible war. On the morning of the third day, the summons came. All delegates were to return to the council chamber for the final session. As Minji walked through the corridors, she noticed the atmosphere had changed. Security forces were more visible, but they didn't seem tense. Several younger species representatives nodded to her as she passed, showing solidarity. Even some elder species junior staff made brief eye contact with expressions she couldn't quite read. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. The chamber filled quickly. Every seat was occupied, and the holographic audience had grown to include what analysts estimated was over 1 billion simultaneous viewers across the galaxy. Whatever happened here would shape galactic politics for generations. Council Speaker Thralvan stood, and silence fell immediately. His crystalline body seemed dimmer than before, as if the past days had drained something from him. This emergency session has challenged the foundations of galactic governance, he began. For the past 2 days, the Council has deliberated intensely on humanity's response to our ultimatum and their alternative proposal. We have also listened to the voices of many member species who have expressed positions we had not fully appreciated. Minji kept her expression neutral, but her heart was racing. The elder species built this council millennia ago to prevent the wars and catastrophes that marked our early histories. We believed that by establishing guidelines for expansion, military strength, and resource use, we could prevent younger species from repeating our mistakes. Our intentions were good. Thralvan paused, and Minji sensed what was coming. But we recognize now that our approach has been flawed. By imposing limitations on younger species that we do not impose on ourselves, we have created a system that appears less like wise guidance and more like perpetual dominance. Humanity has forced us to confront this truth. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several elder species representatives looked uncomfortable, but none protested. The ultimatum presented to humanity is hereby withdrawn. The chamber erupted in reaction. Younger species delegations broke into applause, or their cultural equivalents. The human delegation remained seated, but exchanged glances of relief. Thralvan raised his appendages for silence. However, this is not the end of the matter. It is the beginning of something new. The Council accepts humanity's core principle that any rules governing galactic civilization must apply equally to all member species, regardless of age or power. Now, even some elder species representatives were nodding. Thralvan continued. We propose the Galactic Accord for Mutual Development. Under this framework, all species will operate under the same transparent regulations regarding expansion, military capacity, and resource use. The specific limits will be determined proportionally based on population, territory, and legitimate security needs. Most importantly, enforcement will be conducted by independent oversight committees with representatives from all member species, not just the elder civilizations. Minji felt a wave of emotion she had to suppress. This was more than they had hoped for. Not complete victory, but genuine reform. The elder species acknowledge that we too must submit to these new regulations, Thralvan said. This will be difficult for us. We have grown accustomed to operating without the same scrutiny we impose on others. But humanity is correct. A just system cannot have one set of rules for some and different rules for others. Commander Zekthal of the Dravik Concordat stood. For a moment, Minji feared he would object. Instead, He bowed his head in the Dravic gesture of respect. The Dravic have long valued martial honor and strength. We initially saw humanity's military preparations as a threat to galactic order. We now recognize them for what they truly are, the actions of a species that understands the price of unpreparedness. The Dravic Concordat supports the new accord. We will submit our military installations to the same inspection protocols we proposed for humanity. One by one, the elder species indicated their support. Some more enthusiastically than others, but all agreed. The alternative, maintaining the old system in the face of widespread opposition, would have torn the council apart. Thralvan turned to Minji. Ambassador Park, will humanity accept these terms? Minji stood, feeling the weight of history in this moment. On behalf of humanity, I accept the Galactic Accord for Mutual Development. We entered this chamber, seeking not privilege, but equality, not dominance, but dignity. This accord provides both. She paused, then added, I want to make something clear to all species. Humanity does not claim to be superior to anyone here. We are young, and we have much to learn, but we learned certain lessons through terrible suffering, and those lessons shaped how we approach galactic civilization. We believe that fairness, transparency, and equal application of rules are not weaknesses, but foundations of lasting peace. We're grateful that the Council has chosen reform over rigidity. The chamber filled with a sound like applause. Though each species expressed approval differently, the Kashari resonated their bodies to create harmonic tones. The Torvani stamped their feet rhythmically. The Velkir flashed bioluminescent patterns. Dozens of species, each celebrating in their own way. As the formal session concluded and delegates began to disperse, something remarkable happened. Several elder species representatives approached the human delegation. Not all of them, but enough to matter. A junior Kashari diplomat spoke first. My people are proud, and this has been humbling for us. But I want you to know that many of my generation are glad this happened. We have been troubled by the inequalities in the system, but didn't know how to address them without seeming disrespectful to our ancestors who built the council. A Paleon scientist approached next. Your research into our historical resource exploitation was thorough and damning. It stung to see our past mistakes presented so publicly. But we needed that reminder. We had started to believe our own mythology about always being wise stewards. Thank you for the uncomfortable truth. Throughout the rest of the day, Minji met with dozens of delegations. Some wanted to establish closer ties with humanity. Others wanted to participate in drafting the new oversight committees. A coalition of younger species invited humanity to join their informal alliance, not as leaders, but as partners in ensuring the reforms were implemented fairly. That evening, as Minji prepared to return to Earth, Jackson found her standing at one of the observation windows, looking out at the twin stars. You did it, he said simply. We did it. Minji corrected. Humanity did it. And not just humanity. Every species that stood up and demanded fairness. Do you think the reforms will actually work? The elder species still have enormous power. That's now. That. The Palachi, they do, Minji agreed. But power operates within systems of legitimacy. The old system lost legitimacy when its unfairness became undeniable. The new system, if implemented honestly, has a chance. It won't be perfect, and there will be resistance. But it's better than what came before. She turned from the window. We came to the galaxy 3 centuries ago. As survivors of our own worst impulses, we brought with us the hard-earned knowledge that strength must serve justice, that preparation prevents war, and that lasting peace requires fairness. Today, the galaxy took a step toward embracing those principles. What do you think they'll say back on Earth? Minji smiled. I think they'll say we did our job. We didn't conquer anyone. We didn't threaten or bully. We simply refused to accept subjugation and insisted on being treated as equals. That's all humanity ever wanted. As their ship prepared to depart the council station, Minji took one last look at the galaxy spread out before her. Somewhere, out there, on thousands of worlds, beings were discussing what had happened here. The story would be told and retold how humanity, young and relatively weak compared to the ancient civilizations, had challenged the galactic order, and won not through force, but through moral courage and the power of a simple idea: that all species deserve equal treatment under the law. Humanity had come to the stars carrying the scars of Earth's violent past. Those scars had taught lessons that many older species had forgotten. Today, those lessons had helped reshape galactic civilization. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying Minji and her team home. Behind them, the Council was already beginning the difficult work of implementing the new accord. Ahead of them, Earth awaited news of what its ambassadors had achieved. Minji closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the relief, the exhaustion, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that humanity had earned its place in the galaxy. Not as subjects or conquerors, but as equals who understood that true strength lies not in dominance, but in the courage to stand firm on principles of fairness and justice. The declaration had been made. The galaxy had listened, and nothing would ever be quite the same. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.